I was at the cruise port, suitcases ready at my feet, sunscreen on my face and sunglasses on, ready to embark on the dream vacation with my son and his wife. At least that's what I thought. Until suddenly I received a text message. "Mom, there's been a change of plans. You're not coming on the cruise. We're just taking the family." In that instant, my heart froze. But before I continue, check if you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I can still feel the salty smell of that morning. The port of Miami was bustling with excited tourists carrying suitcases and smiles. I was smiling, too anxious for the family cruise we had planned for months. At 62 years old, it would be my first time on a ship, a small dream come true after so much work. My sunscreen in my straw bag, my new beach hat, 3 dresses bought especially for the formal dinners. The happiness of a simple woman about to realize a modest dream. My son Daniel was running late, nothing unusual. Ever since he married Sarah, punctuality had become a luxury item. I sat on a bench near the boarding area and waited, watching the families arrive, animated, hugging, united, like I thought ours would be. That's when my phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. "Mom, there's been a change of plans. You're not coming with us on the cruise. Sarah prefers it to be just the family. We'll explain better when we get back." I read those words 3, 4, 5 times. My eyes couldn't believe it, but my heart already knew. I lifted my head, and there they were on the ship's upper deck, Daniel, Sarah, and my 2 grandchildren, Mason and Chloe. They didn't realize I was watching them. Or maybe they did and pretended not to. Sarah was smiling, adjusting her blonde hair as she pointed something out to the children. My son was looking at his phone, probably checking if I had read his message. "Just the family," as if I were what? A distant satellite, a stranger. Not the woman who raised him alone, who worked 2 jobs so he could go to good schools, who held him when he came home crying after losing soccer games. My hands were trembling. I grabbed my suitcases and walked out of that port without looking back. The taxi dropped me off at home 40 minutes later. I walked into the apartment that once seemed cozy and now tasted of abandonment. I threw my bag on the couch and went straight to my office, where I kept all the important documents. In the second drawer inside a blue folder was the deed for Daniel's house, the house I had bought for them 5 years ago when they got married, the house where I wasn't welcome for weekend dinners because Sarah needs space to create her own family atmosphere, the house whose last mortgage payment I had made exactly 2 months ago, the house that was still in my name. They had never cared about that detail. In fact, Daniel always said, "It's just bureaucracy, Mom. We'll sort it out later." And I, naive, believed it was just a matter of time until we formalized the transfer. But now I understood. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was convenience. I wiped away the tears I hadn't even noticed were falling. I took a deep breath and made a call. "Mr. Mark, it's Helen Miller. Remember that house I bought for my son?" "Yes, that one. I need to know what my legal options are." As I talked to my lawyer, a strange calm began to wash over me. It wasn't rage, although it was there pulsing under my skin. It was a clarity I had never felt before, as if suddenly all the pieces fit together. Sarah's words about creating healthy boundaries, Daniel's growing distance, the comments about me being too intense with the grandkids, the excuses for not including me in celebrations. Even the fact that for the last few Christmases I received increasingly impersonal gifts, an electric pot, a department store gift card. They weren't isolated incidents. It was a pattern, a plan to slowly push me away, keeping only what interested them. My financial support, my availability for emergencies, my name on the documents of the house they couldn't afford on their own. I had been reduced to a function, an emotional and financial ATM. Mr. Mark confirmed what I already knew. The house was legally mine. I could do whatever I wanted with it. Sell it, rent it, modify it. Everything was in my name, and there was no document promising a future transfer to Daniel. "How long would it take to complete a sale?" I asked, surprising myself with the firmness in my own voice. "With an interested buyer, 2 weeks, maybe less if we expedite the process." The cruise would last 10 days. I opened my laptop and typed an email to Teresa, my realtor friend. "I need to sell a house quickly. It's a matter of dignity." That night I didn't cry anymore. I made a chamomile tea, sat on the balcony, and watched the illuminated city skyline. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Daniel, Sarah, or the grandkids. I was thinking about me. Who was I before I became Daniel's mom, or the kids' grandma? I remembered the Helen who loved to dance, who dreamed of seeing Paris, who had her own friends and interests. The Helen who had been gradually erased to make way for a convenient version of myself, one that fit perfectly into the corners of their lives without bothering, without taking up too much space. That message at the port hadn't just been an exclusion from a cruise. It had been a cruel reminder that to them I was no longer essential. I was disposable, an extra, not family. Well, if that's how they wanted to play, I had my own cards, and it was time to use them. I took out my journal and started writing a plan. Not for revenge, although there was a bitter taste of justice in it all. It was for survival. It was for self-respect. While their ship sailed away from the Caribbean coast, I began to chart my own course, a course where, for the first time in decades, I was the priority. The following week was a whirlwind of calculated actions. Teresa, my realtor friend, found an interested couple in just 3 days. Young, no kids with cash. We scheduled a showing for the next day. I needed an excuse to get into Daniel's house. After all, even though it was legally mine, they considered it their home. I used the key I always kept. For emergencies, Mom, Daniel used to say. I entered with the strange feeling of invading a space that belonged to me on paper, but not in their hearts. I came to pick up some plants to take care of while you're away, I told the curious neighbor who was watching me from her garden. She smiled, believing me. After all, I was Daniel's dedicated mother, known by everyone in the neighborhood. Inside the house, I was met by silence and memories. I remembered the day I handed them the keys, the emotional hug Daniel gave me, the tears of gratitude in Sarah's eyes. How had that turned into just family in such a short time? As I walked through the rooms, I noticed the signs of my gradual exclusion. In the photos on the walls, I appeared less and less. In the latest picture frames, I wasn't in any of them. On the bookshelves, no book I had given was displayed. Even the quilt I had knitted for them was stored in the closet, replaced by a store-bought one. In Daniel's office, I opened drawers looking for any document related to the house. That's when I found an envelope with a lawyer's letterhead. Inside, a draft document titled Property Transfer, dated 3 months ago, but never signed or presented to me. The text was clear. They plan to ask for the house to be transferred to their name as soon as the last payment was made. That is 2 months ago. But something stopped them. Maybe they calculated I wouldn't agree so easily, or maybe they were waiting for the perfect moment to bring it up when I was emotionally vulnerable. I put the document in my purse. Evidence. Not that I needed more reasons to go ahead with my plan, but that confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't an oversight. It was a strategy. The next day, the interested couple visited the house. Emily and Robert, both doctors, fell in love with the property. It's perfect for us, they said, unaware of the drama surrounding those walls. They made an offer above market value with cash payment and a closing date in 1 week. Are you sure about this, Helen? Teresa asked as we signed the initial papers. I've never been more sure, I replied. Surprising myself with the firmness in my voice, Mr. Mark, my lawyer, handled all the legal aspects. He explained that as the registered owner, I had every right to sell the property. They can't claim surprise or ignorance since the property was always clearly in your name, he explained. The sale was finalized in record time. The money was deposited into my account, and the new owners would receive the keys on July 27th, 1 day before the cruise returned. There was one more detail to handle. What would they find when they came back? I didn't want to just disappear. I wanted them to understand the consequences of their choices. So I wrote a letter. Daniel and Sarah, the house you called home has been sold. It was always legally mine, as you well knew. Just as you knew, I finished paying off the mortgage 2 months ago using my retirement funds. When I received your message saying I wasn't family enough to join you on the cruise, I finally understood my place in your life, a convenient peripheral place available only when needed. The new owners will move in tomorrow. Your personal belongings have been stored in a storage unit paid for 3 months. The key and address are with Mr. Mark Almeida, whose contact information is attached. Don't bother looking for me. Just as you needed space to grow as a family, I also need space to rediscover who I am besides a disposable mother and grandmother. Helen. I put the letter in an envelope and left it on the kitchen table, where it would surely be the first thing they'd see. Next to it, I placed a copy of the house deed and the sale contract. On the last night before handing the keys to the new owners, I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced. I put on Aretha Franklin on my phone and spun around the empty living room, now bare of furniture, stripped of the fake smiles and photographs, cleansed of unspoken lies. "Your family is now homeless," I whispered to the echo in the empty house. That dance wasn't a celebration of revenge. It was a ritual of liberation. For years I had defined myself by the roles I played in others' lives: Daniel's mother, Sarah's mother-in-law, Mason and Chloe's grandmother, emotional and financial ATM, good example, always available, never too much. As I twirled in the empty room, I felt the weight of those roles falling off me. It was as if each spin gave me back a piece of the Helen I once was, the one who had her own dreams, desires, a life beyond serving others. The next day, I handed the keys to Emily and Robert. They were beaming, talking about plans to redecorate how they would turn the spare room into a shared office. "The energy in this house is special," Emily said. "You can feel there was a lot of love here." "There was," I replied, "but not all love survives convenience." She looked at me without understanding, but smiled anyway. I smiled back, a genuine smile for the first time in days. As I walked out the gate for the last time, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't name. It wasn't exactly peace, nor revenge, nor sadness. It was the painful relief of finally seeing reality as it is not as we wish it to be. I returned to my apartment downtown and made a call. "Mary," I said to my sister, "that trip to Paris we always dreamed of. How about next month?" I hung up before she could answer, then sent the tickets I had bought that morning. It was time to live my own dreams, not just finance others. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since that day at the port. No nightmares, no waking up with a start without that ache in my chest that had been with me for weeks. As the ship slowly returned to the Caribbean coast, I was moving further and further away from the port of Miami where they had departed. Not physically, but emotionally. They were planning to return to a life that no longer existed. I was planning to depart for a life that was just beginning. The flight to Paris left in exactly 30 days enough time to organize my new life and watch the consequences of my decision from a distance. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed to understand that this wasn't a temporary nightmare. It was the reality I had built for myself, one brick of self-denial at a time. 3 days before the cruise returned, I received a message from Daniel. "Mom, we miss you. The kids ask about you every day. Can't wait to show you the pictures." I smiled bitterly at the phone screen. The hypocrisy was so transparent, I could almost see it shining between the words. No apology for the exclusion, no acknowledgement of the hurt caused, just the continuation of the script in which I was supposed to play my part. The understanding mother, always ready to forgive. I didn't reply. Each unread notification was a small act of rebellion against decades of unconditional availability. The next day, another message arrived, this time from Sarah. "Helen, we brought you some wonderful Belgian chocolates. Chloe picked them especially for Grandma." Again, I left it on read. Silence was my only possible response at that moment, because if I started talking, I might not be able to stop, and I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. 24 hours before they disembarked, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, it's weird that you're not answering. Is everything okay? We're worried. We arrive tomorrow at 6 in the evening. Can we come over for dinner? The kids miss you." The concern in his voice sounded genuine, which made everything even more confusing. How could he exclude me so coldly and then act as if nothing had happened? It was like we were living in parallel realities. On the day of disembarkation, I woke up early and went to a coffee shop near the port. From a distance, I saw the huge white ship slowly approaching the coast. Somewhere on that floating structure were the people I once called family. I ordered a double espresso and watched the growing activity at the terminal. Anxious families waiting for their loved ones, app drivers holding signs with names, street vendors offering water and snacks. At 6:15 p.m., I saw Daniel, Sarah, and the children coming down the ramp. They were tanned, smiling, loaded with bags. Chloe was holding a new stuffed animal. Mason was wearing a t-shirt from some Caribbean island. They looked like the perfect picture of a happy family. I turned away before they could see me, paid for my coffee, and left. I didn't need to witness the moment they would read my letter, the moment they would realize the house was no longer theirs. That wouldn't bring me satisfaction. I went back to my apartment and turned off my phone. Whatever happened in the next few hours, I didn't want to be a witness. It wasn't about torturing them or savoring their confusion. It was about finally creating the space I needed to heal from decades of small disappointments. That night I slept a restless sleep. Part of me still felt guilty, conditioned to put their needs before my own. But another part, the one growing stronger every day, knew I had done what was necessary. At 7:43 the next morning, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Daniel. He was alone with deep, dark circles under his eyes and a pale face. I opened the door without a word. "How could you?" were his first words, his voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "You sold our house without even consulting us. It wasn't our house, Daniel. It was mine. It always was. It's in the contract you never bothered to read." He ran his hands through his hair, disoriented. "But we lived there. We had a life there. The kids grew up in that house. And I had plans to travel with you to be part of the family. It's funny how plans change, isn't it? It was just one trip, Mom, a single trip. No, Daniel, it was the last straw. It was the moment I finally understood my place in your life. Convenient when you need me. Disposable when I'm in the way." He collapsed onto the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. "Where are we going to live now? Did you think about the children?" That question ignited something inside me. Decades of sacrifices, of putting his needs before my own. And still, the first concern wasn't about me, my feelings, the pain they caused me. It was about the inconvenience I had created. "You have 3 months of storage paid for, enough time to find another place." And yes, I thought about the children. I thought about what kind of adults they will become watching how they treat their own mother. Daniel looked at me as if I were a stranger. In a way, maybe I was. The mother he knew, docile, always available, ready to sacrifice everything, had disappeared at the port that day. "Sarah is devastated," he said, as if that should matter to me. "And how do you think I felt when I read your message that day? Just family. As if I were a distant acquaintance, not the woman who raised you alone." "It was just a poor choice of words, Mom. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything, Daniel, and you know it. It was the perfect summary of what I've been feeling for years, that I'm only welcome when it's convenient, that my role is to finance dreams, not participate in them." He got up, pacing nervously around the room. "What do you want from us?" "An apology." "Okay, I'm sorry. We're both very sorry. It was insensitive. It was wrong. But to sell our house, this is disproportionate. I don't want a forced apology. And it's not about the house. It's about respect. It's about finally understanding my worth. And how much is that respect worth the price of a house?" That question hit me like a slap. Suddenly I saw with crystal clarity what was happening. He wasn't there because he cared about my feelings or because he understood his mistake. He was there because he needed a roof over his head. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. The house was sold. The new owners have already moved in. It's irreversible, just like the damage you caused by excluding me from that trip. So now what? What do we do?" I don't know. I'm going to Paris in 27 days. I'm finally going to live my life, not just exist in service of yours." Daniel looked at me as if he'd been shocked. "Paris? For how long?" "I don't know. Maybe a few weeks, maybe months, maybe I won't come back." He took out his phone, his hands shaking. "I need to tell Sarah. She's not going to believe this. Tell her I finally understood what family means. It's something small, self-contained that eventually falls apart. When Daniel left, closing the door behind him, I felt a huge weight being lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't happiness or satisfied revenge. It was simply the relief of finally having spoken the truths I had held back for so long. I took my laptop and opened the email from the airline. The ticket to Paris glowed on the screen like a promise, not of escape, but of a new beginning. At 62, I was about to start a whole new chapter, a chapter in which I was the protagonist, not just a supporting character in someone else's story. In the following days, the messages and calls didn't stop. Daniel, Sarah, even mutual friends who were activated to try to bring me to my senses. Every phone notification made me take a deep breath, looking for the strength to stick to my decision. "Helen, you can't just disappear and leave your son and grandchildren on the street," said Martha, my friend of decades, in a WhatsApp audio message. "I know they hurt you, but this is disproportionate." Disproportionate. That word haunted me. As if there were an exact measure of reaction for every hurt, a perfect equation to calculate how much suffering I deserved what response. "They're not on the street, Martha," I replied. "They're in a storage unit paid for 3 months. Besides, Daniel earns a good living. He always said the house was too small for them. Now they have the opportunity to find something that really suits the family." Even as I typed those words, I felt a pang of guilt. Not for my actions, but for the bitter person I seemed to be becoming. This wasn't the Helen I knew. Or maybe it was finally free after decades of repressing her true feelings. On the 10th day after the sale of the house, I received a bouquet of flowers. White roses, my favorites, with a handwritten card from Sarah. "Helen, I understand your pain, and I sincerely apologize for how we made you feel. Can we talk, not for us, but for the children? They miss you." The appeal to the children was predictable. I knew they would eventually use them as an emotional shield, as a last resort to make me give in, but this time it wouldn't work because I missed them too painfully. But I needed to break the cycle I had created where my unconditional love was taken for granted and exploited. I put the flowers in a vase, took a picture and sent it to Sarah with a single word: "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, nor an opening for dialogue. It was a civilized acknowledgement of the gesture, nothing more. 2 weeks before my trip, I had an unexpected visitor, Chloe, my 7-year-old granddaughter, accompanied by the nanny. "Grandma," she ran into my arms as soon as I opened the door. "I missed you so much. Why didn't you come visit us at the new house?" My heart sank. The children, of course, were not to blame for anything. They were just pawns in this emotional chess game the adults were playing. "I missed you too, my love," I replied, hugging her tightly. "I just needed to sort some things out." The nanny handed me an envelope. "Mrs. Sarah asked me to give this to you personally." Inside, a formal invitation to a dinner at the new house they had rented. "To start over as a family," the card said in elegant calligraphy. That night, I sat with my journal and weighed my options. Going to the dinner would signal that everything could go back to normal, that a formal apology was enough to erase years of small humiliations. Not going would confirm the image they were probably building, that of the bitter and vengeful old woman. I picked up the phone and called Daniel. "I got the invitation," I said without preamble. "That's great." He sounded genuinely relieved. "So you're coming?" "No, Daniel, I'm not." Silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, we're trying to fix things. What more do you want from us? I don't want anything from you, and that's the point. For years you wanted me available when it was convenient and invisible when it wasn't. Now I'm choosing to be unavailable to you and visible to myself. But what about the kids? They're not to blame for any of this." "I agree, and that's why I'll keep in touch with them. But on my terms, not yours." "What terms are those?" His voice had a hint of poorly concealed irritation. "I'll take them for a weekend with me, once a month, without you. Just as you wanted a cruise without me, I want time with my grandchildren without you." "This is ridiculous, Mom. You're using the children as a bargaining chip." "No, I'm setting boundaries, something I should have done a long time ago." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or regret. It was the adrenaline of finally confronting the toxic dynamics I had allowed to be established. The next day, Sarah showed up at my door. She was impeccably dressed as always, but her face betrayed sleepless nights. "Helen, can we talk?" "Just the two of us, woman to woman?" I gestured for her to come in, offered coffee that she refused, and we sat facing each other in the living room. "What happened to you?" she asked, her tone between concerned and accusatory. "This isn't the Helen we know." "You're right, it's not. That Helen died at the port when she read her son's message saying she wasn't family enough for a cruise." Sarah looked down. "It was a terrible mistake. We were stressed with the preparations. I wasn't feeling well with my mother being sick. It was an impulsive decision." Impulsive would be forgetting to tell me about a dinner. Deliberately excluding me from a family trip is a conscious choice, one that reveals exactly what you think about my place in the family. Sarah sighed, adjusting the pearl necklace I had given her last Christmas. "We were always grateful for everything you did for us, Helen. The house, the financial support, the help with the kids." "Were you grateful? Is that how you show gratitude, by treating me like an employee whose services you can dispense with when it's inconvenient?" "It's not fair to put it that way," she protested, her voice trembling. "We've tried to build our own family, our own identity as a couple. Sometimes that means setting boundaries." "Boundaries," I repeated, feeling the bitter taste of the word. "It's funny how those boundaries never applied when you needed money to renovate the kitchen, or when you wanted to leave the kids with me to travel for work." Sarah blushed slightly. "I know it sounds hypocritical. It doesn't sound, Sarah, it is." She took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "What can I do to fix this? We are truly sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her, searching for signs of sincerity in her perfectly made-up face. There was something there, not genuine remorse perhaps, but certainly an understanding of the consequences. "There's nothing to fix," I replied calmly. "You made your choices, I made mine. Now we live with them." "But what about the children? We need to find some stability for them. As I told Daniel, I will remain present in their lives on my terms." "Weekends without us?" Her tone betrayed irritation. "As if we're not trustworthy with our own children. It's not a matter of trust, Sarah. It's a matter of building my relationship with them independently of you, just as you built your family independently of me." Sarah stood up, smoothing her skirt as she did when she was uncomfortable. "You've changed, Helen." "Yes, I have. I should have changed a long time ago." After she left, I felt strangely light. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't cried. I had simply spoken the truths that needed to be said without drama or excessive resentment. The old Helen would have given in, would have accepted any crumb of reconciliation, starved for approval and inclusion. But this new Helen, or perhaps the original Helen, who had been suffocated by years of self-denial, demanded respect, not just crumbs of attention. The following week before my trip, I kept my promise. I picked up Chloe and Mason to spend a day with me. I took them to the zoo. We bought ice cream, took silly pictures, talked about everything and nothing, their school friends, their favorite animals, the book Chloe was reading. At no point did I mention their parents or the situation between us adults. They were children. They deserved to be spared from adult dramas. When I dropped them off, Daniel was waiting for me at the door, tense. "Did you have fun?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "A lot," I replied, maintaining the same forced lightness. "They brought the drawings they made for you." "Thanks for doing this," he said, sounding genuinely grateful, "for not keeping them from me because of all this." "I would never do that, Daniel. I'm not like you." The comment hit him as expected, but he just nodded, taking the blow. "When are you coming back from Paris?" he asked, changing the subject. "I don't know. Maybe never." "Are you serious?" There was genuine panic in his voice. "For the first time in decades, I'm putting my needs first. I'll stay as long as it takes to rediscover myself." "And what if we need you? What if the children need you?" I smiled, not with joy, but with the certainty of someone who finally understood her worth. "You survived without me for 10 days on a cruise. I'm sure you'll survive during my trip." The night before the flight to Paris, I did something I had been putting off. I opened the box where I kept all of Daniel's memories, pictures from his childhood school drawings, his first baby shoe. Each item told the story of an unconditional love that had slowly been transformed into convenience. I didn't throw anything away, nor did I hide the box in the back of the closet. I just looked at it, acknowledging that those memories were part of me, just like the pain of the recent exclusion. I didn't need to deny the past to embrace the future. The next morning, as the taxi took me to the airport, I received a message from Daniel. "Have a good trip, Mom. We love you even if you don't believe it right now." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't believe in their love, but because I had learned that love without respect is just an empty word, an excuse to continue harmful behaviors. The plane took off promptly at 10:25. As America was left behind, I felt like I was breathing freely for the first time in years. It wasn't just a geographical journey, it was a journey into myself, to rediscover the Helen that existed before being Daniel's mom or the kid's grandma. The Helen who had her own dreams, desires a life that wasn't summed up by serving others. The flight attendant served champagne in business class, a luxury I had allowed myself with the money from the house sale. I raised my glass in a silent toast not to the end of a family, but to the beginning of myself. Paris greeted me with a light rain and gray sky, but even that didn't diminish the magic of the moment. Mary, my sister, was waiting at the airport with a colorful umbrella and a huge smile. "Welcome to your new life," she said, hugging me tightly. Mary was always my opposite. She never married, never had children, built an international career, and lived between Paris and Cancun for decades. While I dedicated my life to Daniel, she dedicated hers to herself. For years, I felt a veiled superiority in relation to her choices, as if my maternal sacrifices were somehow nobler than her selfish life, as we used to call it in our family conversations. Now at 62, I was beginning to question who had really made the wiser choices. "How are you feeling?" Mary asked as her driver navigated us through the Parisian traffic. "Free, scared, guilty, all at the same time," she laughed. "Welcome to real life, sister, where no emotion exists in isolation and all decisions have a price." Mary's apartment was in the Marais, a historic neighborhood full of galleries, cafes, and independent designer shops. Her sophisticated lifestyle had always seemed extravagant to me, almost frivolous. Now I saw how she had created a life that reflected exactly who she was, without compromises, without unnecessary sacrifices. "I've prepared the guest room, but I think we need to find your own space soon," she said, as she showed me the beautiful room overlooking an inner courtyard. "How long are you planning to stay?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I never planned anything beyond selling the house and buying the ticket." "Perfect," Mary smiled. "The best journeys are the ones without a defined script." In the following days, I immersed myself in Paris like a thirsty person in an oasis. We visited museums, sat in cafes, watching people walked for hours along the Seine. I absorbed every moment like a sponge, filling a void I didn't even know existed inside me. My phone remained mostly off. I turned it on only once a day, usually at night, to check important messages and make a short video call with Chloe and Mason. The conversations were always light-focused on their daily activities and my discoveries in Paris. We never talked about the situation with their parents or when I would be back. A week after my arrival, Mary organized a dinner with some of her friends, artists, writers, university professors. Fascinating people who lived intense and meaningful lives well into their 60s. "This is my sister Helen." She introduced me to an elegant woman with gray hair. She finally discovered there's life beyond being a mother and grandmother. At another time, I would have been offended by that description, but that night, between laughter and glasses of red wine, I recognized the truth in her words. "And what do you do, Helen?" asked Philip, a comparative literature professor. "I'm rediscovering who I am," I replied, surprised by my own honesty. "I spent decades being defined by my roles in others' lives. Now I'm writing my own definition." "Ah, a journey of self-discovery," he smiled, "the most important of all journeys." That night was revealing. For the first time in decades, I was seen and appreciated as Helen, not as someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's mother-in-law, just Helen with her own opinions, stories, and dreams. The next day, Mary surprised me with a proposal. I have a friend who rents a small apartment in the 11th arrondissement. Nothing fancy, but with all the Parisian charm. Want to see it? Rent for me, but I don't know how long I'll stay. Exactly why. No long-term commitment. Just a place of your own while you decide your next steps. The apartment was a typical Parisian studio. Small but perfectly organized, with high windows that let in the golden autumn light. Old wooden floor that creaked slightly underfoot. A tiny but functional kitchen. It's perfect, I whispered, feeling that this space symbolized exactly where I was in life. A transitional place, but mine. A beginning. That same afternoon, I signed a 3-month renewable lease. With part of the money from the house sale, I could afford this transition period without immediate financial worries. After 2 weeks in Paris, I received an email from Mr. Mark. Daniel had hired a lawyer and was threatening to contest the sale of the house, claiming there was a verbal agreement that the property would eventually be his. Don't worry, Mr. Mark wrote. Without formal documentation, there's nothing they can do legally. The sale was completely legitimate. Still, the news affected me not because of the fear of losing the legal battle, which I knew was non-existent, but because of the confirmation that Daniel still hadn't understood. He continued to see the situation as an injustice against him, not as a consequence of his own actions. That night I called him for the first time since my departure. Why the lawyer, Daniel? Mom. He sounded genuinely surprised to hear my voice. Where are you? We were worried. In Paris, as I said I would be. Why did you hire a lawyer? Silence on the other end. Then a sigh. Because it's not fair. That house was our home. We had an agreement. What agreement, Daniel? The one that existed only in your head, or the one you planned to impose on me after I finished paying the mortgage? What are you talking about? I found the draft of the property transfer in your office, dated 3 months ago, never presented to me. You were waiting for the right moment to pressure me, weren't you? More silence. It was Sarah's idea, he finally admitted, his voice low. She thought we should formalize the situation since we had been living there for years, and you always said the house was for us. And you decided that without consulting me, just as you decided I wasn't family enough for the cruise. They are completely different situations. No, Daniel. They are exactly the same. In both cases, you made decisions about my life, my feelings, and my property without considering me worthy of being part of the conversation. I heard him take a deep breath, as he had since he was a child when trying to control his frustration. So now, what are we going to live in this impasse forever? You in Europe, resentful, and us here trying to rebuild our lives. I'm not resentful, Daniel. I'm finally living my own life, not the one you designed for me as a convenient supporting role. And I suggest you drop the lawsuit. It will be humiliating for you when it's rejected. You've changed, Mom. I don't recognize you anymore. Maybe you never really knew me, only the version of me that was convenient for you. After hanging up, I cried for the first time since arriving in Paris. Not for the house, not for the lawsuit, not even for the fractured relationship with my son. I cried for the Helen who had spent decades suffocated under layers of others' expectations, for the woman she could have been if she had set healthy boundaries from the beginning. The next morning, Mary found me on the balcony, watching the street movement with a cup of coffee. Tough night, she asked, noticing my swollen eyes. Daniel hired a lawyer. He wants to contest the sale of the house. Mary let out a dry laugh. Of course he did. When people lose their privileges, they call it injustice. He's my son, Mary, despite everything. Yes, and you love him. But loving doesn't mean letting yourself be exploited. You didn't take anything that was rightfully his. You just stopped giving what was rightfully yours. Her words resonated deeply. For my entire life, I had confused love with sacrifice, generosity with self-denial, as if loving necessarily meant diminishing myself, becoming less so that the other could be more. But true love for others and for oneself didn't demand that imbalance. It didn't ask me to disappear so that others could shine. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I enrolled in a watercolor painting course. a teenage passion I had abandoned when I got pregnant with Daniel, considering it a frivolous hobby, incompatible with maternal responsibilities. The studio was in an old building in Montmartre with huge windows that framed the rooftops of Paris like a living painting. The teacher, a man with white hair and ink-stained hands, greeted us with a gentle smile. "Watercolor is like life," he said, demonstrating a soft brushstroke. "You can guide the water, but you can never completely control it. The beauty is in accepting the unpredictable paths it chooses." As I mixed colors and watched them flow across the paper, I had an epiphany. This was exactly what I was learning to do with my own life. Guide, not control. Accept the unpredictable. Find beauty in unexpected paths. At the end of the class, I had created a small landscape, imperfect certainly, but vibrant with colors and possibilities, just like the new chapter I was beginning to write for myself. Autumn in Paris turned the trees into explosions of red and gold, as if the entire city was celebrating my personal transformation. The days grew shorter, but somehow my hours seemed fuller, more meaningful. I established a routine that was exclusively mine. I would wake up early, have coffee at a small boulangerie on the corner where the owner already recognized me and would save me a still warm croissant. I walked through different parks every day. I attended my watercolor classes twice a week. And at night, I often had dinner with Mary and her friends, or simply stayed in my small apartment reading or painting. It was a simple life, but completely mine. Every decision, every moment was chosen by me and for me. The weeks passed, and the frequency of Daniel's messages gradually decreased. Mr. Mark informed me that he had dropped the lawsuit, finally accepting that he had no basis for a contest. I continued to have regular video calls with Chloe and Mason, but even these became less frequent as they adapted to the new family dynamic. In mid-November, I received an unexpected email from Sarah. "Helen, I hope you are well in Paris. The photos you send the children are beautiful. They love showing their friends where Grandma is living now. I am writing to apologize. Genuinely this time, not for the practical inconveniences we caused each other, but for the emotional damage we caused you over the years. Daniel and I have been in couples therapy since you left. It wasn't easy to face certain truths about ourselves, about how we treated you, about the toxic patterns we established. The therapist helped us see how we normalized manipulative and selfish behaviors, disguising them as setting healthy boundaries or building our own family. The truth is, we took your generosity for granted. Worse, we consciously exploited it, knowing you would never say no. You would never set firm boundaries. You would never demand reciprocity. I don't expect you to forgive or forget, nor am I asking you to come back or restore the previous situation. I just wanted you to know that your drastic decision forced us to confront painful truths and start making real changes. Daniel has difficulty expressing this, so I'm taking the liberty of speaking for both of us. He is still processing a lot of anger and guilt, but he is making progress. The children are well. We miss you, but we respect your journey. With sincere wishes for your well-being, Sarah." I read the email several times, trying to discern manipulation disguised as sincerity. But something in those words sounded different from previous attempts at reconciliation. There were no implicit requests, no mention of the house or the financial situation, no attempt to use the children as emotional leverage. I showed the email to Mary during dinner that night. "What do you think?" I asked as she read it carefully. "It seems sincere," she said finally, handing back my tablet. "But the important question is, what do you think?" I reflected for a moment. "I think they are finally understanding not just what I did, but why I did it." "And does that change anything for you?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm not ready to forgive completely, nor to go back to the old dynamic." "Nor should you," Mary affirmed, pouring more wine into our glasses. "Forgiveness, when it comes, should be for your own peace, not for their comfort. And regardless of forgiveness, you must never again accept being treated as before." I nodded, absorbing the wisdom of her words. That night I replied briefly to Sarah. "Thank you for the email. I appreciate the honesty and acknowledgement. I am also on a journey of self-discovery and healing. I'm glad you are seeking professional help. The children are always welcome in my life, as is honest communication between us adults. Helen." Short, without promises or concessions, but also without hostility. a small step in the direction of something new. Not a restoration of the past, but perhaps the construction of a different future. December arrived with Christmas lights transforming Paris into a fairy tale city. My watercolor class organized a small end-of-year exhibition, and to my surprise, 2 of my pieces were selected. Nothing grand, just a small gallery in the Marais, but for me, it represented something monumental, the recognition of my value beyond family roles. On the day of the exhibition opening, I stood in front of my framed watercolor, a view of the Seine at sunset with shades of blue and purple blending on the horizon. It wasn't technically perfect, but it captured something real, a moment of peace I had experienced alone sitting on the riverbank. "It's beautiful," said a familiar voice behind me. I turned around astonished, and there was Daniel. "What are you doing here?" I asked, almost breathless with surprise. "Sarah saw the exhibition invitation on your Facebook. I thought maybe it was time for a face-to-face conversation." He looked different, thinner, with subtle dark circles under his eyes, but also with a softer, less defensive expression. "Did you come alone?" "Yes. Sarah stayed with the kids. She understood that we needed this time, just the 2 of us." We left the gallery and walked to a nearby cafe. The night was cold but clear, with a starry sky rarely seen in the illuminated city. "Your painting is really nice," he said as we sat down with steaming hot chocolates. "I didn't know you painted." "Me neither," I replied with a slight smile. "There are many things about me that you don't know that I didn't even know myself." He nodded, stirring the chocolate with a spoon. "I've thought a lot about that, about how I never really saw you as a whole person with your own desires and dreams. You were just Mom, an extension of myself in some way." The disarming honesty took me by surprise. This was not the defensive Daniel I had left behind. "Therapy seems to be working," I commented. He gave a small smile. "It's hard, painful actually, to confront patterns I didn't even know I had, to see how I treated the person who loved me most in the world." "I still love you, Daniel. That never changed." "I know, and I abused that love for years." He paused, taking a sip of chocolate. "I didn't come to ask you to come back or to undo what you did. I came to say that I understand and that I'm trying to change to be better." We were silent for a few moments, letting those words float between us. "Are the kids okay?" I finally asked. "Yes. They miss you, but they're adapting. Chloe has saved every picture you send in a special album. And you, the new house. It's smaller, simpler, but it's working. Sarah went back to work part-time. We're learning to live with less to value what really matters." "I'm so sorry it was so hard for you." He shook his head. "Don't be. It was necessary. Painful, yes, but necessary. Like surgery to remove something toxic." His words echoed something I had felt myself. That feeling that the pain was necessary for healing, that some wounds needed to be opened to finally heal properly. "When are you going back to the States?" I asked. "Tomorrow. It was a quick trip just to see you for this conversation." "And what happens now between us?" Daniel thought for a moment. "I don't know. I think we start over in a way, not like before. That would be impossible and unhealthy. But maybe we can build something new based on mutual respect this time." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. It wasn't complete forgiveness, nor immediate reconciliation. It was something more nuanced, more mature, the recognition that relationships like people can evolve and change. "I'd like you to meet my friends here in Paris," I said impulsively. "Mary is organizing a Christmas dinner next week." "I'd love that," he smiled, "but I have to get back for Sarah and the kids. Maybe next time. Are you spending Christmas here?" "Yes, Mary and I have plans." "I understand." He seemed genuinely disappointed, but he didn't push. "Maybe we can do a video call that day. The kids would love that." "I'd love that," I replied sincerely. When we said goodbye at the cafe door, he hugged me, not the quick, automatic hug that had become our habit in recent years, but a real, long, heartfelt hug. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "I'm sorry for everything." "I love you too, son," I replied finally, letting a few tears escape. "I always have." As I watched him walk away down the street, lit with Christmas lights, I felt something untie inside me. It wasn't complete forgiveness. That would still take time, but it was the beginning of a healing. For him, for me, for our broken relationship. That night I painted late in my small apartment. It wasn't the Seine this time, nor Paris. It was a Mexican beach with turquoise waters and golden sand, a place where I once took Daniel as a child, where we built sandcastles, which the tide inevitably washed away. I called the painting Reconstruction. Christmas in Paris was magical in a way I had never experienced before. Mary decorated her apartment with a small pine tree laden with vintage ornaments. Golden lights illuminated the windows, and the scent of mulled wine filled the air. Her friends gathered for a sophisticated but cozy dinner, bringing dishes from their own family traditions. On Christmas morning, we had the promised video call with Daniel, Sarah, and the children. They had organized a special breakfast with the table decorated and gifts wrapped with my name on them. "To open when you come back," Chloe explained with sparkling eyes. The conversation was surprisingly easy, without the tension I expected. Sarah seemed different too, less polished and perfect, more authentic in some way. She proudly showed me the decoration of the new house, smaller but cozy with personal touches that revealed more personality than the impersonal mansion they had inhabited before. "When are you coming back, Grandma?" asked Mason, leaning into the camera with hopeful eyes. I looked at Mary, who was watching the video call with discreet interest, and then back at the screen. "I haven't decided yet, dear. I'm learning a lot here, rediscovering things about myself." "Like painting," said Daniel with a smile. "I showed them pictures of your exhibition." "Yes, I want to learn too," exclaimed Chloe. "Can we have classes together when you come back?" "I'd love that," I replied, feeling a wave of tenderness. "Maybe we can find a teacher in Denver." After the video call, Mary and I went for a walk along the Champs-Élysées, admiring the festive decorations and the bustle of families enjoying the holiday. "They seem really different," Mary commented. "More humble." "Yes," I agreed. "I think they're really trying. Therapy, the new financial reality, maybe even the shock of suddenly losing me. All of that seems to have awakened something in them." "And does that change your plans?" Mary asked, linking her arm in mine as we walked. I reflected for a moment. "I don't know if I have plans exactly. More of a direction than a destination." Very philosophical," she laughed. "But seriously, are you thinking of going back to the States?" "Eventually, yes. This is a wonderful chapter, but not the whole book of my life. My grandchildren are there, part of my heart is too, but not under the same conditions as before." "Definitely not," Mary affirmed, not as a question, but as a confirmation. "I will never again be that invisible Helen convenient only when needed." We stopped in front of a dazzling shop window, contemplating our reflections mixed with the sparkling Christmas lights. Two middle-aged women, similar in features, but so different in life experiences united by blood and shared history. "Do you know what impresses me most about this whole story?" Mary said, adjusting her red scarf. "It's not the revenge itself, although it was masterfully executed. It's how you emerged from it. Many people become bitter, consumed by resentment, even when they win. But you flourished." Her words touched me deeply because they captured exactly what I myself had begun to perceive. The sale of the house had not been the end of the story, but the beginning. It wasn't about punishing Daniel and Sarah, but about freeing myself from the invisible chains that I myself had helped forge over the years. January arrived with a light snow covering the Parisian rooftops, transforming the city into a fairy tale landscape. My lease was ending, and I needed to make a decision. Renew for another 3 months, or go back to the States. On a particularly cold afternoon, walking through the almost deserted Luxembourg garden, I made my decision. It was time to go back. Not out of obligation or guilt, not yielding to family pressure, but because I was ready to build the next chapter of my life. One that included my family, but also so much more. I called Daniel that night and shared my decision. "I'm coming back in February," I said, "but with some conditions." "What are they?" His voice showed a mix of joy and caution. "I'm going to maintain my independence. I've already rented an apartment near yours, but I don't want to live with you or be a full-time babysitter." "I understand and respect that," he replied promptly. "I want to keep painting. I found a studio in Denver that offers classes similar to the ones I have here." "Of course, Mom, your time is your own. And we need to establish clear boundaries and mutual respect, all of us. Even the children need to understand that Grandma has her own life." "We're working on that in therapy," he said, "learning about healthy boundaries, not just to protect ourselves, but to respect others too." The ease with which he accepted my conditions confirmed what I had already perceived. Something fundamental had changed, not just in me, but in him too. Maybe in all of us. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Mailing some paintings and books, packing suitcases, saying goodbye to the new friends I had made. Paris had given me so much in such a short time, not just memories and skills, but a renewed version of myself. On the last night before my departure, Mary organized a farewell dinner. During the toast, she looked me deep in the eyes and said, "To my sister Helen, who showed that it's never too late to reinvent yourself." On the flight back to the States, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the last few months. I had left as a wounded woman seeking revenge, but I was returning as someone much more complex. A woman with clear boundaries, with her own passions, with a new understanding of her worth beyond family roles. Revenge had only been the catalyst, the necessary push for a much deeper transformation. Daniel and the children were waiting for me at the airport with handmade signs and genuine smiles. Sarah was there too, more reserved but visibly trying. I hugged them all, feeling the family warmth mixed with a new dynamic still taking shape. "Welcome back," said Daniel, carrying my suitcases. Or maybe I should say, "Welcome to a new beginning." "I like that," I replied, smiling. "A new beginning for all of us." In the following weeks, we gradually established our new dynamic. Weekly family dinners where we talked about real issues, not just superficialities. Special days with the grandchildren where I took them to parks, museums, and yes, the watercolor classes Chloe had asked for so much. And most importantly, time for myself. My cozy apartment, my studio 3 times a week, new friends, a life that was truly mine. Daniel and Sarah continued in therapy, learning to build a healthier relationship, not only with me, but with each other. The loss of the house, though traumatic, had forced a reevaluation of priorities that was slowly transforming them into better people. On a particularly pleasant Sunday, 6 months after my return, we were all gathered for a barbecue in the backyard of their apartment, smaller than the old house, but much cozier. I watched the scene with a sense of peace I never imagined possible after that day at the port. Daniel grilling Sarah, setting the table, the children playing on the lawn, me contributing a dessert I had learned to make in Paris. "You know what I'm thinking," said Daniel, approaching with a glass of wine. "I never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For being strong enough to force us to change, for not accepting being treated that way. If you had just given in like you always did, we would still be trapped in that toxic cycle." His words surprised me. I had never thought of my revenge as a gift to them too, but in a way it had been. The pain of loss, the humiliation, the forced awakening, all of that had created space for something new and potentially better. "I still miss it sometimes," he continued, looking at the horizon. "The house, it was nice, spacious. But I realized it was never really a home. It was more of a trophy, a status symbol. This place..." He gestured to the small garden where we were, with its imperfections and limited space, feels much more like ours. I nodded, understanding perfectly what he meant. Sometimes we lose something valuable only to discover that what was truly precious was somewhere else. "Sometimes I wonder," I said, "if I would have found the courage to change if I hadn't been so drastically excluded that day, if I would have rediscovered painting Paris, my independence." "I can't change what I did," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can promise that I will never make you feel invisible again." "That's all I ever wanted," I replied honestly, "to be seen not just as a mother or grandmother, but as Helen." That afternoon, as I was painting with Chloe in the small studio I had set up in my apartment, she asked me an unexpected question. "Grandma, have you forgiven Daddy and Mommy for not taking you on the cruise?" I paused, searching for words a child could understand, but that were still true. "You know, Chloe, forgiving doesn't mean pretending something painful didn't happen or that it didn't matter. It means deciding not to let that pain control your future. And yes, I am forgiving a little more every day." "Like in your paintings," she said, surprising me with her insight. "When you make a mistake, you can't erase it, but you can turn the mistake into something beautiful." I smiled, amazed at the wisdom of this 8-year-old girl. "Exactly like that, my love. Exactly like that." Life continued its flow with new patterns establishing themselves. I was no longer the infinite source of financial and emotional support for Daniel and Sarah, nor did I want to be. But I was a constant and valued presence in their lives, especially for my grandchildren. I was also a developing artist, a friend, a traveler, a woman rediscovering dormant passions and cultivating new ones. The house I sold was never mentioned again, as if we all tacitly understood that it represented a closed chapter in our lives. The new owners had extensively renovated it. Once we passed by it during a walk, and we barely recognized it. "It looks like a different life," Daniel commented. "It was," I replied simply. On my 63rd birthday, I received a surprising gift from Daniel and Sarah, a ticket to Italy, and enrollment in a painting workshop in Tuscany. "So you can continue your journey," said the card that accompanied the gift, "with all our love and respect." Looking at the envelope with the tickets, I realized I had come full circle. The pain of that day at the port had been transformed into something completely unexpected. Freedom. Not just physical or financial, but the inner freedom to finally live as the woman I was always meant to be. Revenge had only been the beginning. The rebirth that followed that was the real triumph. Now, if you liked this story, go ahead and click on this next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on Elderly Stories.